Hey folks, David Stewart here. If you notice my backdrop is a little bit different than normal, it's because I am out on the road, but I still wanted to deliver this movie review to you. It's a review of a brand new movie that came out over the weekend, which is already being called a commercial and critical failure, and that is Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets, written and directed by Luc Besson of Fifth Element fame. I'm going to lead off this review by saying I recommend it. It is going to get a recommendation from me, which may surprise some of you, especially given what I may say about it later. However, every so often, there's something that kind of challenges my normal attitudes. Rarely will I ever say that function ought to follow form. But Valerian is one of those movies that makes me kind of eat my words on some of those things. Like, story should be the primary thing. Well, in this case, we have a movie that's so visually interesting, that presents such a realization of an imagination, is so imaginative, that I end up having to recommend it regardless of any of its other flaws or any of its story issues, any of that sort of stuff. You end up forgiving all of that because it's not just visually stimulating and visually interesting. It's not just fighting robots in Transformers. It's a realization of somebody's visual imagination. Being brought into movie form in action and in frame and in style. Kind of like if you walk by and you see a really, really strongly interesting surrealist painting, or you see a great piece of fantasy painting. You stop and you appreciate the image for what it is, regardless of what it represents. And I think Valerian is a movie that functions on that level really, really, really well. That's why it's going to earn my recommendation. It's also a movie that I think will make... I think it's a really, really good argument for how CGI works and that CGI can be good. I know we've had a lot of discussions on this channel before about whether or not CGI is good or how it should be used appropriately. And my general feeling is that I think it works great as background because you're not focusing on it, so you're unlikely to see the little flaws that are inherent in it, and it shouldn't be used for faces. In the case of Valerian, it's used quite often for faces, and it's used quite effectively for faces, enough so that I'm willing to take a second look at some of my sort of dogmas regarding CGI. It's actually the best CGI I think I've ever seen, and it's probably the best realization of imagination, of somebody's imagination of a visual space being brought into film. It's probably the best version of that I've seen since Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Like, you could say what you want about George Lucas, but he was very, very good at delivering really good visuals, like really imaginative, new, interesting things to sort of feast your eyes on. And Revenge of the Sith was definitely that, and this movie is definitely that as well. In fact, I might call this movie space opera simply because of its focus on delivering you the fantastical images. That's the main reason that I think it's worth viewing. Is it a flawless movie? No, it is very, very far from flawless. There's lots of little problems with the story and with some of the execution of the story, and especially with the dialogue. The dialogue, there's a lot of places where the dialogue is what I call stilted or overly functional. It's kind of holding up the story, and they actually lead off with some stilted dialogue in the movie. They have this very, very visually interesting scene of an alien planet and these aliens interacting with these like crazy pearls that immediately sort of draws you in and goes like, what am I watching? This is so fantastical. Then it goes to our human characters, and our two protagonists basically at the beginning of the movie have a couple of dialogue where they tell you they create all the exposition for their characters by telling each other how the audience ought to understand them, rather than showing how their relationship actually is. And there's a part where it's like, you Ivy League types that always get good grades, you always fall for the bad boy. And it's like, I don't just fall for the bad boy. I need commitment, and I need more than somebody who's just transient and wants to date lots of women. It's like, okay, they're just kind of like talking, they're really talking to the audience like, here's the relationship that's going on between us. And it's really obvious, and it really sticks out as bad to me. And there's a lot of little places where the dialogue does that. There's a lot of places where one character turns to the other and says something that's important for the next scene in the story, because there's a lack of confidence in the ability to tell the story visually and tell the story through action in a way that the audience is going to understand. In some cases, that lack of confidence is not justified, that they should have just showed what it was rather than have one character say to the other something that's important to know for the next scene. But maybe in some cases they needed to do that because they really didn't succeed with all of this crazy visual imagery to show you what you needed to know to understand the story. So those are the big flaws, and there's a lot of them. There's also this whole weird little middle subplot act involving Rihanna, who I guess is a pop star. I've never really listened to her music. She's atrocious in this movie and incredibly annoying. Every second she's on screen is like, just, I hated it. Her acting, there's something about the way she delivers her lines that just got to me in a really negative way. I really didn't like it. It felt really bad. The character felt like really shoehorned in the story in a way that I didn't like. And the character had a lot of dialogue that was also stilted, overly obtuse, and wasn't what I would conceive of that character actually saying. So that's like a huge, like, and that happens like in the transition to the third act of the movie, and it's just a real low point. I know some people like her. It's like they crammed in this American pop star to just sort of be a fun diversion for like American audiences, but I thought it was bad. I thought Rihanna did a terrible job in this movie. I thought it was very cringeworthy, and so that's a big negative there as well. The production elements were almost flawless though, and that's what you end up forgiving all of the crap for. So all of the badness, you end up just sort of being like, it's okay that you stuck an American pop star in there who can't act and she flubbed her way through a terrible dialogue. You just sort of forgive that because the production elements are so good. The CGI is so good. The environments were so well designed and well executed. Even the acting is good other than Rihanna. You know, like the two main protagonists, this is a problem. The two main protagonists are cast too young, I think, for the story that they're occupying. One of them is a major, and he looks like he's 21. You're just not really going to believe he's a major. The other one, the girl, she looks like she's 20. I'm not really going to believe that she's like a high-level intelligence operative in whatever this future Federation type thing is. And it's especially apparent when those characters are opposite someone like Clive Owen, who's very mature, very masculine, extremely good actor, kind of makes those young characters, although they weren't badly acted at all, it makes them really apparent. That's an element of production that I thought was not so good. But other elements of production are great. The costumes look good. They're very aesthetically interesting of themselves, as well as functioning to let the characters know like what the rank of a particular character might be, or let the audience know what the rank of a particular character might be, or what his role might be. So it's functional and it's aesthetically pleasing. The score was good in the sense that it worked really well for the movie. It wasn't a particularly thematic or memorable score, but it did a really good job of working within the frames of the movie to offset it. The orchestrations were really good. So overall, I did like the score. I liked the sound design as well. There's some really screaming loud parts and some parts that are quiet even within an action scene, so things have a little bit bigger impact than what they have in most modern action movies. The movie is action-packed. It's cut and shot very tight, but it's not cut and shot overly tight. It's not one of these things where you're seeing like 24 frames at a time to take in a visual. The director really frames up a visual and lets you take it in, and you get to spend some time looking at what they've crafted, because they did spend so much time designing the environments and designing the characters that you see. You really do get to see them, and I did appreciate that. And there's also none of this like, shaky cam business, or there's a little bit, but it's not like it was in Force Awakens or some of these other recent movies. It's not like it was in Transformers. The shaky cam is gone in place of camera that shows you exciting visuals that are worth seeing. So overall, I thought the production was so good that it kind of offsets any of the bad parts about how the movie came together. Let's talk a little bit about story. The story, I don't think, is the main reason why you see this movie, but it's not like a bad story, and it's not terribly executed. It's got some problems that could have been fixed by cutting out Rihanna in the middle, for instance, or just shortening some certain things that they kind of committed too much to in the middle of the movie. The A story kind of focuses on these aliens that you see in the introductory scene that isn't explained till later, and what's happening with them, and this sort of pocket of radiation inside this giant space station. The main setting piece for this movie is this giant space station called Alpha, composed of many spaceships that have hooked up to it over, countless centuries, starting on Earth and then moving away from Earth as it became too dangerous for it to be near Earth. So that gives you a huge diversity of visuals. And the A story is told through revelations involving these aliens and involving this danger in the center of the station. And because it's told through revelations, you do have, it is a gimmick that works to maintain plot tension. So the plot tension is maintained most of the way through the movie, and only towards the very end do we have any kind of feeling that we've gone too long with any of it. But it's really not that bad. Overall, it's done okay. The B story is this love interest between the two protagonists that I had the hand puppets for, and it's okay. Because there's not enough screen time to fully develop those characters, we have to rely in some cases on the stilted dialogue to do it. In other cases, I think they could have just done a better job visually presenting the evolution of their relationship in that B story. Then there's a bunch of other little subplots, one that involves Rihanna's character, one that involves some other aliens. And those are interesting in and of themselves, and they contribute a little bit to the main plot goals as well as we go into the third act. So overall, the story is not that bad, but I felt like there was this ongoing lack of confidence from Luc Besson in his ability to visually tell the story that he was trying to tell. And so he relies on bad dialogue to fill in the gaps. There's even a point where Valerian turns to another character and tells her this piece of information that's just going to be revealed in the next scene. He just foreshadows it really obviously because there was a feeling, and I think the feeling was probably correct, that the reveal wasn't previously established well enough through the execution of the story. Meaning that if you saw the reveal without that dialogue ahead of time, you wouldn't really believe it. And unfortunately, because the dialogue so stilted, we get our attention drawn to that reveal and the fact that it wasn't super well established in the visual execution of the movie or just the storytelling of it. So those are most of the flaws with it. The flaws are numerous, but the flaws end up being forgiven when you sort of take it as a piece of art and see everything that sort of has been thrown into your face visually. Aesthetically, this is a really, really colorful future, bright and full of vibrant colors and lots of contrast between light and dark. This is a big difference from sort of the gritty future that you see sort of very popular right now in science fiction. And for me, that was kind of a relief. I wanted something kind of shinier and more explosive and more positive in a sense. Especially since Star Trek, the last couple Star Trek movies have gone more that kind of grittier direction since that first J.J. Abrams movie. It's kind of cool to have something that's bright and shiny again instead of like dark. And so that was kind of a cool relief for me. So overall, Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets, which is the space station. I do recommend it, and I do think that most people who are interested in experiencing something that only a visual medium can deliver to you will enjoy the movie, and people who are set out to not like the movie are probably not going to like it. I think if your expectation is I'm going to see a really, really cool, explosive, exciting movie, you won't be disappointed. There's plenty of places where the characters do things that you don't really believe, but like I said, you end up kind of forgiving them because even though the action may not be that believable, the way that it's presented is so interesting. You're just kind of like, oh, it's cool. I'm okay with it. So that's all I have to say about that. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you thought of it down below or whether this was helpful to you. Don't forget you could still buy my books. All the links are down below. Water of Awakening is my newest one. That's my fantasy book. You can also read my science fiction book, Prophet of the God Seed. If you find the link down below, I'm giving it away free on Amazon. It'll be free on Amazon for a little while, so you can grab a copy of it right now. And it's also available on paperback right now, too, if you're looking for that hard copy. But you can get the ebook for free and read it. And if you feel like helping me, one of the best ways you can help me with anything with my books is to leave me a review on Amazon.com. That helps your fellow consumers out and helps people to know whether or not they should invest their time and money possibly in a particular piece of art from me. Thanks so much, and y'all have a great day.